Welcome to this week's Community Focus. I'm your host, Jaden Jefferson. I'm right now joined by Lucas County Engineer Mike Pniewski. Thanks for being here.
Hey, it's a pleasure. Thanks a lot for inviting me, Jaden.
Yeah, I really wanted to dive into the issue 2, which we saw pass this week during Ohio's primary election. Obviously, what it did was issue $2.5 billion in bonds from the state for local infrastructure projects. Now, obviously, on the surface, you can understand that that's state dollars going to local road, sewer, and maintenance projects, but why is this so significant for communities in the state?
Yeah, I mean, what it ends up doing, what issue two is that $250 million a year gets spread over 19 districts across the state. And it's a way for the state to help local governments pay for local infrastructure projects. Here in Lucas County, that results in about an extra $7 million a year that we wouldn't otherwise have to be able to support local infrastructure. And we use that for all kinds of things. A lot of the people don't realize that a lot of the monies that we get, like federal monies, is usually for new construction. It's very difficult to get monies to do what we would call more maintenance type things. People would expect maintenance. A lot of these monies help to support and make local dollars go further so that we can do more on a yearly basis. So what people don't realize is that, like infrastructure is like your house.
Yeah.
If you don't have, the money to do it now, then you just push it on. And over time, the more you push it on and push it on, it gets worse and worse and worse. And if it gets worse and worse and worse, it just gets more and more expensive to repair. So this type of money actually is a savings for the taxpayer because we can get work done. We can maintain things at the right time that can be maintained really cheaply and makes our infrastructure go a lot further.
Definitely important to be proactive, especially when you want to save money, because getting ahead of a problem is a lot better to handle. There is, of course, the work of distributing those funds. And so, what would you say is the way you decide which projects will you use those state funds for?
So each district has, so the state law has criteria that you have to essentially judge infrastructure projects on. So every year we put out a call for projects to all the jurisdictions in Lucas County, and they basically put in their projects and they rank and score their projects according to an objective criteria. That criteria gets scored against everybody else, and the projects that get the highest scores are the ones that get funded. So it is a very objective process. It's very clear to the jurisdictions what things they have to do and what things they have to meet and what relative weight those things provide. And it comes up with a numerical score, and the committee looks at the numerical scores, and the ones that are the highest scoring are the ones that get funded. There is some play, especially in the state capital improvement program. You have to, like on a rolling basis, you have to allocate so many to cities, villages, townships, and counties. But generally, the way that we've been doing things, at least as long as I've been doing it for the last 7 years, we meet those requirements pretty easily in terms of spreading the money around to different jurisdictions.
And I want to emphasize that this isn't something that we are calling a road specific issue because we've been passing this for a few years now, but it actually goes to fund projects such as sewer infrastructure, which is something that you don't think about too often, and maybe some other uses of money that a county engineer would have. And so, generally speaking, what would you say is the common type of project that this issue has funded?
I can do for anywhere from road resurfacings. A lot of times you use this so every time you get federal dollars, there has to be a local matching dollar. So a lot of times these monies are used to do as a local match, which means that your regular money can be used for different things. It doesn't have to be used for that local match. It's used for typically water and sewer really is not eligible for grant funding. Most of the stuff for water and sewers are all loans. You can get federal loans, or you have to fund it through bonds, paid for by water and sewer rates. This is really one of the few things where you can actually get grants for water and sewer projects. So a lot of people do it to do sewer repairs or sewer relinings, wastewater treatment plant updates. It helps pay for those type of projects too. And this type of money really isn't available for those types of projects.
And voters approved these bonds this year as issue 2, but of course, I'm sure it's changed names before. But at the end of the day, it's always been bonds that we've paid for these projects. And so, what would you say has been the difference they've made in Toledo and Lucas County in particular?
Yeah, so they are bonds paid for by the state. And one of the best things about bonds, the enemy of cost for infrastructure projects is inflation. So what it provides for you is that you can put out bonds, you can these projects are all necessary. If they're not able to be done today, they'll be done in the future and they'll just cost more. So if I have a project this year that I can build with issue two funds and I can put it in this year, usually that'll probably save between 10 to 15% that I would have had to pay next year because of construction inflation. So it really does save a lot of dollars, putting out those bond projects at for bonds at like a 3 to 5% rate. Really makes our dollars go further because we're not delaying projects, and we're not essentially you can pay them cheaper with today's money than versus tomorrow's money. So it really does. It really has enabled our area to provide a lot more projects than we otherwise could have with limited funding. Generally, infrastructure funds are not usually they don't go up as quickly as inflation does. So it really eats away at our ability to build projects in the future because we really don't have a lot of capacity or ability to get additional monies to pay for this type of infrastructure and this type of investment.
So as we've discussed, obviously it's great to have the issue of money handled, but I'm sure other challenges come up when it comes to addressing some of the challenges of our sewer infrastructure, water infrastructure, road infrastructure. So what are some other hurdles that you have to clear once you have the funding secured?
Funding is actually the biggest hurdle to clear when we
I don't
have
think
to.
anyone would disagree with that.
Yeah, I mean, typically, we all have projects we need to do and are necessary to maintain that investment and to improve our quality of life. And money is usually the biggest hurdle. After that, you're dealing with, you might have some permitting issues, some environmental permitting issues. You may have to work in terms of scheduling and when's the best time to like shut down a road or to try to coordinate projects with other types of projects that might be going on in the area to try to maybe push some stuff up, push some stuff back. But honestly, the biggest challenge to be able to execute a project to get that happening is to find the funds to be able to do it.
And to go back to that number that you had brought up, Lucas County getting about 7 million a year from this, obviously the state has to make that determination based on population, the size of that community, and what its needs are. Would you say that that 7 million is enough, or would you like more even?
We can always use more. There's a lot of projects that are on the shelf that we would like to execute and pull forward and be able to do at a much cheaper price than if we had to do it otherwise. But our infrastructure system, if you look at our infrastructure report card, so they just released the National Infrastructure Report Card in March. Our infrastructure is at a C, and there's like a $3 billion trillion deficit in terms of what we have versus what we need to be able to make our infrastructure at I would call a B grade. So basically fulfills the needs that we have today. We're about to release an Ohio report card just for the state of Ohio that's going to be coming up this June. And it will largely say the same thing. There is a big gap between the monies that we have available now, which essentially it keeps it in decent shape, but we will be falling behind in the future if we don't find ways to determine how we're going to get the funds needed to keep our infrastructure in good working order. And even to meet the challenges of the future, because we have a lot of challenges in the future to be able to compete with all the new things that are going on, with issues in terms of extreme weather events and trying to accommodate those things and how it impacts our residents, in terms of dealing with things in terms of growth and where growth is occurring and how to grow our economy and give the infrastructure necessary to grow our economy in Northwest Ohio. All those things need the resources to be able to put those investments to make Northwest Ohio thrive. And right now, the monies that we have, it helps us to maintain the things that we have today. But over time, it's not enough. You'll start seeing the people like me are having to make decisions in terms of, what are the highest priorities that we need to put these investments in, and there are other areas we're just going to have to let it go, and unless we get more funds to be able to do it. This definitely does help us. $7 million is not a kick in the bucket. It does help us to make that happen. If it would have failed, it really would have put us in a pretty difficult place in terms of the future. It's something you don't see right away. I mean, infrastructure investment, if it doesn't happen, you're not going to see it tomorrow, but you will see it 10 years from now. And then, you'll question why something wasn't done. But the reality is infrastructure deterioration is a very slow process. If you go up to the state to the north of us, of course, in Michigan, you see the results of that lack of investment
There's a
in terms of what their
juxtaposition for
infrastructure
sure.
look like. right? Because Ohio's been very good with programs like Issue 2 to keep things maintained in a relatively decent manner. Michigan has not done that, and you can definitely see the results of that if you go from Toledo, from our office about 5 or 6 miles north of us. You definitely see the difference as soon as you cross that line.
Yeah, and I also appreciate you making the connection there with climate because that is something that is one of those examples of if you do not put the funds toward those fixes now, it will become a significantly more expensive problem in the future.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of climate change, people argue about the reasons for climate change. As an engineer, I really don't care. What's important to us is the fact that it's happening. And statistically, you can look at statistics, you can look at the rain events and how they're changing. You can look at what's going on. Statistically, you can't explain it away. It's happening. As engineers, we don't question the why. We question the what are we going to do? And so there we need to figure out what we're going to do about it because here in Northwest Ohio, we've definitely seen our rainfall patterns change. We're getting about the same total amount of rainfall that we've always gotten. But what's changed is how we're getting it. So we're getting it in much more intense bursts. We're getting much more higher rainfall events split further apart. And our infrastructure was not made to take those high bursts. And we're seeing a lot more flooding and a lot more issues with having to deal with extreme rain and weather events than we've seen in the past.
A lot of our infrastructure was built for different weather expectations, and obviously you see that during the summertime as well, where it just becomes difficult for the infrastructure to handle all of that water that we see. Lucas County Engineer Mike Pniewski, I thank you for coming on Community Focus.
Thank you, Jaden. It's been a pleasure.